Without further ado, please welcome warmly Colin McAllister. Thank you.
Jane? Thank you, everybody. One of the nice things about doing this in the Chapman is that I don't have to wear a mask so that you can hear me. You can't imagine this semester how much trouble we've had in music theory when I say E flat versus B flat versus D flat, right? People are like, no. So anyway, welcome and thank you, Jane. So I appreciate our tech folks here. I feel so formal doing this. This is like a TED Talk or something. It's kind of fun up here on the stage. So today, yes, I'm going to talk about the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative, of which I'm a part this year. Talk about kind of what that involves, my fellowship with them, and then talk about some things that are going to happen in the music program. So first of all, what is the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative? So this is a program that happens at 12 different schools, and UCCS is one of them. The others are throughout Colorado and into Wyoming as well. Based here at the College of Business, that's a resource for principle-based ethics education serving students, educators, and the business community, and it promotes certain ethics principles as a constant foundation for personal and organizational ethical decision-making and leadership. And, you know, I was encouraged, so this is a program for which faculty members all over UCCS can apply. And it obviously attracts a lot of folks from the College of Business because I think usually when we think about ethics in practice, we're normally thinking about business applications, right? And so I had seen it before and I hadn't given it a lot of thought. And then a couple of years ago, one of my colleagues, I think whom you all know, Kevin Landis, director of the Theater and Dance Program, went through this program and did it. And I went to a couple of talks associated with it. And he told me, he said, hey, you might want to try this because there aren't many folks from the arts community that get involved with this ethics initiative program. And last year we had another VAPA colleague, Robert Van Desenowski from Film Studies and Languages and Cultures, who also did it. So I kind of owe it to both of them for pointing the way. And as I thought about what I would put in for the application, because you have to apply for it, I thought, well, part of what's taken out of this definition is exactly who musicians are, right? We are leaders. Right? Many of us musicians, we teach, we play in different community groups, we might play at a church, we might, certainly, a lot of you in this room are already instructing young people in some capacity, right? So you're leaders. So I think musicians, we are by nature leaders, and we're also active in the business community. We run our own businesses, but how many folks here have played a gig at some kind of corporate event before? I bet just about all of you, right? So you've been active in business. You're also active in your communities. Think about, I remember a first Friday that Glenn introduced during COVID time saying, hey, you know, who do people turn to in a crisis? Music is one of the things that a lot of people turn to during that time. And we all continued to make music in that time. So we are leaders by example, we're active in our communities, and we are engaged in business, our own businesses, and also in the way we interact and work with others. So that gave me a little more confidence to say, maybe I can do something with this program. So the Bill Daniels, I should say a little bit about Bill Daniels, I guess, because this whole program is sponsored by, is paid for from a foundation that he established when he died about 20 years ago. He was a very successful business person, and he was known as an ethical business leader. And he really tried to promote that through all the decisions he made in business. And I'll give you just one example. He owned, in the early 1970s, a basketball team in Salt Lake City. I think they were called the Utah Stars. And they had financial problems, and the team ended up going bankrupt, the whole franchise. And so you probably know, well, hopefully not through personal experience, but maybe somebody else who's filed for bankruptcy, that a lot of your debts are absolved, right? That's part of the deal with bankruptcy, is that some of your debts that you just cannot pay are taken away, and then you're allowed to kind of start over. So that's what happened with Bill Daniels and this basketball team, and they had to actually cancel mid-season. So all the players were sent home. All the vendors had lost out, the rental space. All the season ticket holders had their season tickets canceled in the middle of the season. So by law, Bill Daniels was exempt from having to repay any of that. But what he did is he went off into other businesses, regained his financial footing, and 5 years later came back to Salt Lake City and repaid every single season ticket holder, every vendor, every player, facilities rental, not only what they were owed, but 8% interest per year over 5 years. So it's just a great example of someone who went above and beyond what was required by law to do something that was really ethical and to repay folks. So this whole program is sponsored by this foundation, and the collegiate program is part of it. There are ways for faculty and students to get involved, but there's also a high school component of it. There's a professional component. So it's a big foundation that does a lot of different things, and I'm just one small part of it by being a Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative Fellow this year. That's my official title, and there are 9 of us this year at UCCS. So I gave you a little card that the business college hands out, which has these, and I guess this is a little small. Maybe you can read it on your card easier. These 9 ethics principles that Bill Daniels put together that he kind of tried to apply through his businesses. And they are integrity, trust, accountability, transparency, fairness, respect, rule of law, and viability. So this is a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. First, I'm going to talk about the apocalypse. No, I'm just kidding. That's when Glenn falls asleep there in the background anytime I start talking about the apocalypse. So no, I'm not going to talk about the apocalypse today. Sorry if that's what you were expecting. I want to talk about personal ethics principles and creating an emotional connection to them. And this is an audience participation event. So hopefully you picked up a little sheet at the front door and you have something to write on. I want to talk about, after that, applications in music and a bit about my pedagogical plan for this year, because really when you become an ethics fellow, what you're asked to do is take some aspect of the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative and apply it through your pedagogy, through your teaching. So involving in students, in classes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, maybe we should just talk more generally about what are ethics. All right? It's like Champ in Anchorman when he said, "What the hell's diversity?" Right? You could say, "What the hell are ethics?" So what do we think of when we think of ethics? Any brave volunteers out there? Yes, Stephen.
I think of that scene of Billy Madison, where Eric uses it at the end because he gets to ask the question about business ethics.
Cool. And what does he say? Do you remember?
He doesn't know what ethics are, and he tries to kind of BS through it, and then he finally snaps and pulls out a gun.
Well, I wouldn't mind someone BSing their way through a definition right now, as long as they leave the gun in their hip pocket. Anybody else? Any brave souls want to say what they think ethics are? Well, I've been reading this interesting book by Peter Singer, who's a faculty member at Princeton University who writes a lot about practical ethics. And he says, well, first of all, really, ethics or morality, he uses the two terms sort of interchangeably. He says, first of all, they're not primarily about sex. Hey, a couple of you guys in the back row woke up when I said that. It's a common teaching trick we use, by the way. Just talk about anything and then mention sex, and students went, what? Ethics, boring talk? What did you say? That it's not primarily about sex, by telling people what they should and what they should not do, right? That ethics should not be something that is good in theory but doesn't work in practice. Ethics and morality are not based on religion. They are not relative to the society in which you live. They're not merely a matter of taste or subjective opinion. And this is the book this is Peter Singer's Viewpoint on ethics. So what he really says is that ethics is something that we've kind of developed a set of what we might call moral intuitions over a period of time that were passed down by our ancestors. And so the idea of, what do we intuitively feel is the right or the wrong way to behave in a given situation? And of course, people are interested in what a lot of the great minds throughout history have said about ethics, right? We can start, I promised John I would mention some of the ancient Greeks. So, of course, Plato and Aristotle wrote about ethics. Cicero, St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, and then later on we have Immanuel Kant and David Hume and Friedrich Nietzsche in the 19th century who wrote about ethics. And in the 20th century, Jean-Paul Sartre, for instance, or more contemporary thinkers like Celia Wolf, Devine, or Peter Singer. So there's a constant ongoing debate about what ethics are, how they should be applied, and what our ethics should be. So developing a personal code of ethics. This is something I want to talk about a little bit today because we had to go to an orientation as part of our training, I guess, induction to the Daniels Fellows Ethics Initiative Fellow. And there was one guy who gave a really great talk that I liked. And I want to just summarize a little bit of that for you because for me, that was one of the most effective things that I heard that day. And the guy's name is Kent Noble. He's actually the Bill Daniels Chair of Business Ethics at the University of Wyoming. And in order to clear myself, I should say that in the interest of ethics, that yes, I wrote to Mr. Noble. I told him I wanted to present some of his ideas today at the First Friday. In fact, could I borrow a few of his PowerPoint slides to do it? And he said, by all means, go ahead. So for this part about personal ethics, I really am indebted to a presentation that he did. There is a full online presentation about this that he has done, and if anybody's interested, I'll be happy to share you the link. It's much longer than what we're going to go through today. And he starts off by asking this question, like, how do people get themselves into such bad ethical scandals? We read about this all the time in the paper, right? Somebody who's a CEO of some company, who's maybe quite well respected in the community, does something that we say is just unbelievably dumb, right? Embezzles millions of dollars and gets caught, or gets into, some kind of shady, illegal business, right? And you say, how does this happen? How can this happen to a person, right? And Bill Daniels always said that, of course, integrity is something that you have to work on building your whole life, and you can lose it like that, right? All it takes is one false step. And this whole lifetime of integrity and goodwill and trust that you've built up can be gone in an instant, right? And companies, we know, all have a code of ethics, a code of behaviors. If you are all sleepless tonight, I challenge you to go to the CU Regents webpage and read about Policy 8, which has a lengthy code of conduct for all members of the university, right? How faculty should behave, how staff should behave, what your job as students are, what you're supposed to do in a given situation, the kinds of things you're not supposed to do, right? Companies have to have this because they'll get sued if they don't have codes of ethics that they can say, yep, we have showed all these codes of ethics to our employees and they abide by this. And well, if they don't, everybody's done the online training to say what they're supposed to do in a given situation, right? And so why not individuals? Why can't each of us have our own personal code that we can build that helps to guide us in our day-to-day decisions? Now, of course, we're all human. We've all made poor decisions and poor choices. But a code of ethics at least can help put in a kind of safeguard in place that might keep us from running afoul. And this could be seen as like a creed, a set of beliefs to live by with some kind of emotional connection. So if we're going to create a personal code of ethics, it has to be personal. It has to be something that each of us has an emotional connection to, right? That you really, when you write your code, when you look at your code, that you say, yep, I identify with that personally. It makes sense to me. It's not just the CU Regents Policy 8, where I have to read through all this stuff. And hopefully, this personal code of ethics helps to guide our daily decisions, because we make lots and lots of decisions every day, right? In our families, in our relationships, in school, at work, in the community, right? We all make lots of decisions. So is this something that can help guide our daily decisions? And it has to be manifested through action, right? Everything, all about this personal code of ethics and your decisions is something that you manifest through action. Otherwise, nobody knows, right? So you want to give this a try? Well, you have no choice, because this is my first Friday and not yours. So get out your sheets of paper and a pencil, if you like, or a pen. So again, Kent Noble says, all right, here are some principles that we can think about that define us and give us something that we can stand for. And the 6 of these, we're going to go through them each one by one. Integrity, the most important thing or things in your life principle. Kindness, respect, effort, and impact. So we'll start off with the integrity principle here. And this has to be the foundation of all of our other principles. This is kind of our guiding mantra, we could say, in our life. So maybe just take a minute and think about, and I'm gonna show you some examples of other people's integrity principles, and then of course later I'm gonna tell you all of my own principles, because of course I went through this same exercise. But think about if there was one overriding principle in your life, one short phrase or sentence that you thought, okay, this one thing could define the motivations for everything that I do. I'm going to give you a little bit to think about it, and then I'll show you some other examples. But think about it first. It's not easy. All right, I'm going to put some up on the screen of examples of other folks. Some of these might inspire you. Kent Noble's personal integrity principle is this one in the middle: live each moment like your kids are watching. That's what he says for himself. Well, maybe most of you don't have kids yet. And you don't care what your parents are watching you, so you got to make it something else, right? I like this one about the permanent brand too. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later in connection with my music business class, but part of being a musician is personal branding, and a lot of how you interact with people in all kinds of different ways is going to be part of your personal brand. It's not just going to be how you are as a musician, it's going to be how you are as a person. I know that these aren't going to come right now, probably. I'm going to go through all of them, but at least hopefully you get a little taste, if this is an exercise that you all want to do in its entirety, something to kind of mull over. It took me several days to really think of mine. I didn't do it in 30 minutes by any means. All right, let's go on to the most important things principle. Thing or things. So this is really thinking about how are you going to allocate the resources in your life? Because each of us, our lives, it's like we're a business, and we have competing interests, right? I got my beautiful wife, Barbara, sitting out here today. I also have students. I have friends. And I have community interests. I have sports that I like to do. I play the guitar, I do all these other things. How am I going to allocate my resources? Because we only have so much time in the day, right? And it would make sense that the most important thing to which we allocate our most precious resource, which is time, should be the most important things. Time is a non-renewable resource, right? If Dylan decides he wants to take 2 days off from teaching students and he doesn't earn any money, he could potentially double up on students the next couple days and earn that money back, right? But if he gives up, I'm picking on Dylan because he's my student who's been with me the longest and he's sitting right in front of me. If Dylan decides to skip a week from practicing, that's a whole week gone by. He can't get that week back, right? So time is a resource that we're constantly losing. We're all going to die. I'm going to talk about the apocalypse. No, I promised I wouldn't talk about the apocalypse. Right? Time is a non-renewable resource. So it really makes sense to think about what is the most important thing in your life? What's the most important driver? And allocating your most precious resource towards that. So think about that. Can you, in a sentence or a phrase, capture what the most important thing or things in your life is? And I'll give you some examples. Oh, I already said that. Oh, money too, right? We have all these important things that we have to do, but we also have to make some kind of living, right? So you got to allocate some time towards that. All right, here we go. Some examples of some most important thing or things in your life principles. Jane, you only get half credit if you write beer. All right, moving on. Okay, kindness principle, right? We all know it's good to be kind to people. We've seen so many feel-good stories about folks who go out of their way to be kind to people, right? The idea of kind of creating some positive ripples in the world. So, what would be your kindness principle? What is something that you feel each day you could do to spread kindness, to incite it like a fire, to hope it continues, passes from one to another? Or what's some special project you might want to do related to that? And again, for some examples of kindness principles from others, we might take a look at these. All right, let's talk about, I think we're halfway through, right? Good. Let's talk about the respect principle, all right? How many folks think that we live in a polarized country right now? A lot of folks, yeah. I would agree with that. We live in a polarized country, right? What are things that we disagree about? Lots of them. Big issues like immigration, stance on the environment, gun rights, health care, the role of education and who should pay for it, taxes and who should pay more or less, pro-choice or pro-life, marijuana legalization, foreign policy, racial inequality, religion. There's lots of things, big issues, divisive issues for people that we disagree on. The rhetoric can be pretty harsh, right? Especially in recent years, I think. And yet, we also know that we as a human species have much more in common than we have differences. No matter where you're from, no matter your background, no matter what part of the world you live in, no matter your station in life. You've probably seen something like this, right? All it takes is a quick Google search. All human beings are 99.9% identical in their genetic makeup. So if we're all that much alike compared to our differences, why do we have such a hard time respecting each other's opinions? Or at least being respectful towards others? I think that's the thing. When I was going through this, I thought, well, there are just certain individuals I can't respect. But can I be respectful towards everyone in the way that I speak to them about differences or address with differences? Absolutely. That's something I have to work on. That's a hard thing to do. So what would be a respect principle then? Could you capture in a phrase or a sentence something about the way that you can go forward being respectful towards or respecting others regardless of their opinions, backgrounds, actions? I think this is a hard one. Here's some examples of others' respect principles. All right, 2/3 of the way through. Let's go on to the effort principle. This is the one that I like to talk to my kids the most about. They hate it. How much effort are you willing to put forth in all these arenas of your life to achieve what you want to achieve? How much effort are you willing to put forth as a student, as a musician, as a person in a relationship, as someone who's part of a family, as someone who's part of a community, maybe as someone who's part of a faith-based organization? How much effort are you willing to put out? We've heard there's lots of quotes about effort, right? A lot of them are really cheesy. I picked one that I thought wasn't too bad by John Wooden, famous basketball coach at UCLA, who said, if you're not giving 100% today, you can't make it up tomorrow. Again, if you only give 75% today, you can't do 125% tomorrow. It's a mathematical impossibility, right? So think about different areas in your life, and think about what your principle for effort might be. For how every day you get up, how much effort are you going to put forth? And some examples of effort principles. I think so much of this one is really applicable to those of you who are students right now, who are starting off in your careers, right? Better to get a great effort principle now than 25 years from now. When you're old like me, right, last one. Impact principle. How will the world know that we're here? What kind of impact are you going to leave? What kind of legacy? Again, talking about the ancient Greeks. For Professor Forshee's benefit, there's a great scene in Book 9 of Homer's Iliad, which is also enacted in its, you could read it and it's great, but it's even better to see Brad Pitt in Troy without his shirt on, you know, like talking about all this, right? Where he meets with his mother. She gives him a famous decision. She says, well, because he says, what should I do? I have to make a big critical choice. And she says, well, if you stay here and continue the attack on Troy, your name will live on in glory forever. But you'll have a short life, and you're not going to get back to your homeland alive. If you decide you want to leave Troy and go back home, you're going to have a long, wonderful, uneventful life, surrounded by your family and friends, but no one will remember your name. So what does Achilles decide to do? Go to war, right? He wants to have his name resound through history, okay? So, again, what kinds of decisions, what would you do for impact? What could be your impact principle? How do you want the world to remember you, or your family to remember you, or, you know, whoever you come into contact with? And how can you lead by example? Because again, what we do is only by example. That's the thing we talk about all the time with teaching, I think. And I think one thing that's so great about teaching music is that as music folks, we can lead by example. All right, I've told this to all my guitar students before. It's like, you know, if I told my guitar students to do this, that, and the other, and they should practice all the time, and they should do this and the other, and then I got up on stage and, you know, fell over myself, they'd be like, wow, that performance was really terrible. Why should they listen to what I say? I have to lead by example. That's a great thing for musicians. We lead, we teach, we influence others by the examples. Not by what we say, but by what we do. So think about an impact principle. What would be your impact principle in a phrase or a sentence? And again, I'll give you a few examples. Oh, another quote. Jackie Robinson, great baseball player. A life is not important except for the impact it has on other lives. And here are some examples of impact principles. And this is the last one, by the way. All right. How many people here have figured out maybe at least one or two principles that you're reasonably happy with? Don't worry, I'm not going to call on you. Okay, good. It's a hard exercise, right? We're certainly not going to accomplish it in a little bit of time, but I think it is something useful to think about. And so at the danger of bearing my soul to the entire folks that are here, I thought I would at least go through the principles that I have right now. And I think these can be subject to change, right? I think it's, as you go along, this is probably something that just like your life changes and your goals change and the directions change, that you might come back to. All right. So for my integrity principle, here it is. Live today like the cameras are rolling. And I did this project a few years ago with this company called The Great Courses, where I produced these guitar instructional DVDs. And I just remember how sharp I was every day because I knew that I was being filmed 5 or 6 hours a day and that was not going to go away, right? That this was going to be something that's put out and people are going to be looking at it years and years later. And it turns out like over 1 million people have watched this guitar instructional video now. So yeah, I felt like, oh, I'm in the spotlight. And I remembered that feeling and I thought, well, wouldn't that be a cool way to approach every day? Not just the 10 days I spent filming, but what if I thought, well, every day I should pretend that the cameras are rolling. Another thing I think about is what if on any given day, PBS said they want to do a documentary about me and they were just randomly going to show up and do that documentary one day, right? So it made me think, wow, that's kind of a cool thing to think about. Like, how does that change the way I might do things if I thought that any day this could happen? So that's my integrity principle. Here's my most important thing in life. Live an exciting and fulfilling life. Because I think that both of those words, exciting and fulfilling, kind of drive all these other decisions that I make. I like excitement, I like new challenges, I like to do things, but also fulfillment comes in a lot of different ways. And if I, pursued excitement only to the detriment of other things, I might not be fulfilled. So that's my most important thing. Kindness. After every interaction I have with someone, they should walk away feeling better about their day. That's so easy to do, right? You see someone in the hallway, hey, how's it going? Oh man, not so great. I'm tired. And then you leave, okay, well, what did that accomplish, right? I think we can be, after interactions, we can make people feel better. That's what I try to do. That's what I want to do. I already said this one, be respectful towards everyone. That's not a very original respect principle, but I thought that was something that I could reasonably follow. Don't wish life was easier, just become better at it, is my effort principle. I don't think that anything worth doing is easy. Otherwise, everybody would do it, right? We all know this as musicians. Being a musician is really hard, right? Learning to play an instrument well is really hard. And not only is it something that you can become really good at and then you have the ability to just dispense it, being a performing musician is even worse because you have to be ready at a specific time. You have to be ready for your recital, Dylan, at 7:30 p.m. on Sunday, November 7th. If you're at your 100% game, November 6th at midnight, that doesn't matter. And if you're at your 100% game the day after, that also doesn't matter as much. So being a musician is really hard, right? So kudos to all of you who are in this musical world, because it's really hard. So it takes a lot of effort, I think. But you're putting in so much effort because it's not something that everybody can do. Hopefully when you compose that great piece or you get off the stage after a concert, you say, wow, that was something that none of my friends can do. None of my family can do. Maybe nobody else at UCCS can do. What a cool feeling, right? And finally, impact. I think this was up on one of the lists. Just make an impact. If I don't, my absence won't matter. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit now. Thank you for going through that extra. Was that sort of interesting? Helpful a little bit? Yeah, okay, good. Good, I liked it. Now I want to talk about this application in music curriculum. So some things that I'm going to try to do this year. So luckily I'm teaching the music business class next semester. How many folks are signed up for that music business class? How come I don't see more hands raised? What is wrong with you all? It is an elective. I understand if you have too many electives already, but I am offering this next semester. So this is a great opportunity to talk about ethics principles in action through some different areas, right? Through personal branding, which we do talk a lot about in the music class. How do you portray yourself as your own brand? Because if you're a musician, you do have a brand whether you know it or not. Intellectual property issues. This might seem a pretty easy one to think about ethics, right? When you borrow material from another composer, or you're trying to license your own material through copyright and that kind of thing. What are ethical business principles? And then, of course, taxes, right? There's an ethical way to do your taxes as a musician, and there's a non-ethical way. We all know that about taxes. In the music business class, we're going to talk specifically about things that you can do as a musician to lower the amount of taxes you pay that are legal and that are ethical. So we're going to talk about that in the music business class. Now, the other idea that I have, and I want to see what you all think of this. This is what I actually put in my proposal for what I wanted to try to do as an ethics fellow this year. Because I thought, well, the music business stuff, that's kind of like every business, right? You could have almost every business, and a lot of those same issues about taxes and intellectual property and those kind of things would apply. So I thought, well, what's something that would be really specific maybe and interesting for performers and composers? And I've talked for years with a lot of composer friends of mine, and all of you know that I've played a lot of contemporary music, especially premieres. Like all of us on the faculty here at UCCS have done a lot of that kind of work. And so that got me to thinking about, well, here, maybe I don't want to read this. I just thought about, well, in the world of contemporary music, it's pretty fast-paced when you get to the professional level. There's never enough time to rehearse, right? And so what I've witnessed over the years is that sometimes performers will take shortcuts towards a composer's music. And there's all kinds of justifications for this, right? Things like, well, this doesn't really work on my instrument here, or this is too hard, or I don't have enough time, or you know what, the composer's not even going to be present at the premiere. I have this great story. Some of you have heard this before, and I'm not going to mention the person who told me this story, but he said to me once, yeah, I agreed to play this recital of a lot of new pieces, and it was an important concert. And 4 of the 5 composers were going to be present the night of the premiere. And he said, you know, I kind of ran out of time, so I really prepared those 4 pieces. And he said the 5th one, he said the first time I looked at the score was the day of the performance. So, what do you think happens then? And this is, well, first of all, this is different from lots of other music, right? If you go to see the orchestra with Professor Whitehead play Beethoven's 5th, and they really take out a bunch of measures and change a lot of things, most of us are going to know, right? We'll say, that didn't sound like Beethoven's 5th to me. I've heard that a lot of times. Right? Or if Ethan over here comes up on stage and says, hey, y'all, I'm going to play this James Taylor song for you. And he plays it and he forgets a whole bunch of the lyrics and kind of makes stuff up and plays some weird chords. Those of you who know James Taylor songs will say, well, Ethan, that didn't really sound like James Taylor. Like, why did you insert all those lyrics about personal ethics principles in the middle, right? When you're supposed to be talking about the Rocky Mountains or something. No, I'm thinking of John Denver, right? But in contemporary classical music, the audience maybe has never heard, and this is specifically premieres, the audience has never heard it before. So that's another justification for, as a performer, saying, well, you know what? Forshee has written this piece for me that's really just crazy, and I'm just going to kind of improvise some parts here instead of playing what he's written, because the audience is never going to know the difference anyway, right? And unfortunately, who usually takes the blame from a bad performance of a new work? Exactly, right? People say, wow, that was a really crappy piece. Whereas it might have been that the performer didn't prepare it adequately. So I thought that this would be kind of a fun laboratory situation to work on related to these ethics principles. And in fact, I've talked with Professor Forshee. We're going to have some meetings in his Music 3500 composition seminar next semester where we kind of talk about ethical relationships and right practices between performers and composers. Because going back to those principles that I had on that card that I gave you, I thought, well, how many of these come into the composer-performer relationship? Integrity. As a performer, are you acting with integrity? Trust. How does a performer create a reputation for trustworthiness in the professional community? Do composers know that you as a performer will always be prepared for every performance, regardless of the situation and whether or not the composer is present? Accountability. Transparency. What is the performer's responsibility to communicate his or her own shortcomings or limitations in the commissioning and rehearsal process? Right? It's fine as a performer if you go to the composer and say, you know what? These tempi are too fast. Wiley, you've written this guitar piece for me and you want this tempo. It's too fast. We got to change something. That's okay. What's not okay is for me to say, yeah, Wiley, I'll take care of it. And then 2 days before the performance, when it's too late to change something, be like, whoops. Can't play what he's written. And of course, respect. Building respect. As a performer, when you go out into the world, if you're commissioning pieces, if you're working composers, you have to be respected by them and trusted by them. Because otherwise, they're not going to trust you with the most important thing maybe that they have to give, which is their music. So I thought this would be kind of a cool exercise that is specific to music that incorporates some of these principles. So I'm going to be trying to implement that next semester through some of the private lesson curriculum and through the composition seminar. And I think that'll be kind of something that will be interesting to look at, some of these important kinds of issues. Because what we do as musicians is so important. It's so important, right? And for those of you who are studying music, it's the core of your being. Music should be some part of the most important thing in your life, right? So that's really at the core, and it's so important, and we have to take care of it, and we have to curate it, and we have to hold that as really that's something sacred and inviolable, I think, as we go forward in our lives. So that's some of the stuff that I'm going to be doing next semester. And I'll finish my presentation now. There are ways to get involved. If this idea of the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative excites you, you can be involved. There's scholarship opportunities for students. You may, well, nobody except for the faculty probably remembers Danica Cox, our former work study student. She was a Daniels scholar. Had a full ride for the whole time she was here. There are student ethics ambassadors. And faculty and staff can become ethics fellows or ethics champions, and there's the website. So I think I'll conclude. We have just a few minutes left if we have any questions from anyone. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it too old to learn the guitar?
No.
Is there an age?
It's never too old to learn the guitar. Yeah. Like all activities that are partly physical, as we get older, things become more difficult. But I have had students in their 70s before who did quite well. Yeah. That's a great question. Did we have another question back here somewhere? I thought I saw a hand raised. I've stunned you all into silence. We should have brought donuts, I guess. Yeah, Jeremy. That is you, Jeremy, right? Yeah.
Can you tell us about the apocalypse?
Yeah, it would take me way too long to talk about the apocalypse. But come to my office hours sometime and we can go at it, yeah. Yeah, Stephen.
Could you re-give this presentation sometime in Latin?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Would you be able to re-give this presentation in Latin sometime?
In Latin? Boy, I could probably write out the stuff in Latin, but I couldn't speak it. Strange questions. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. Of course, I'm always happy to talk about any of this stuff with you. Thanks.